Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can find and subscribe to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our site, vmspod.com, to find more information, as well as our RSS feed, which you can plug into any podcatcher so you never miss an episode of the Virtual Memories Show. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube, where I go by vmspod, and subscribe to my semi-weekly newsletter at buttondown.com/vmspod. Well, I am a day late and a burned out wreck, so let's get to it. I am heading down to Washington tomorrow morning for congressional meetings and then staying over to attend the Small Press Expo in Maryland, where I am hoping/planning to record 3 or 4 episodes of the show and catch up with a lot of guests. I should say Small Press Expo, or SPX, came first, and then my lobbyists said to me, hey, when are you going to be in Washington again? We need to get you down here to see Congress. And I said, well, I'm coming down Friday. And they said, well, let's set up some meetings for Thursday. And the upshot is my first meeting is 11 a.m., and that means I'm going to have to hit the road around 5 a.m. to make sure I get to D.C. in time, while just hoping against hope that Baltimore is not my undoing. I could take the train for this trip, but because it's SPX and all that stuff, it would turn into a logistical nightmare because I'd have to bring like suitcase, podcast bag, all the books I'm bringing down and the stuff I'm going to end up buying. All that stuff's got to go to my lobbyist's office before the meetings, and then getting it all and go to the hotel and blah, blah, blah. Driving's going to take a lot out of me, but I should have some time to recover before SPX gets rolling. And I might actually record a couple episodes Friday before the expo begins. A couple of guests have already said they'll be in early. I'll be there way early. So that might let me just kind of groove through the weekend, but we'll see. The whole thing is I have so much work hanging over me, including my own conference, which will be at the same hotel as SPX in, 4 weeks from tomorrow. That was just a giant ball of anxiety all night. I don't know. I woke up around 2:30, could not get back to sleep. Managed to at some point, I think around 5 a.m., because when I got up for good around 6:15, I had the recollection of a dream that I got back from a trip and discovered there'd been an earthquake here, which happens. We're on the Ramapo fault line where I am, but there'd been an earthquake in the area, and because I walked in the house and like all my furniture was askew, and books and such were all over the place and on the floor. And the thing was, once I woke up and realized I just had that dream, I kind of thought, that's kind of wishful thinking at this point. Just like those giant asteroid 2024 campaign bumper stickers, I guess. Anyway, let's get to this week's show. My guest this time around is David Leopold, and he is one of my favorite people I've gotten to meet through the podcast. David is an archivist. He's best known for his work with the great artist and performance caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. For those of you who somehow don't know who Al Hirschfeld was, he was the artist who captured Broadway and the theater through his drawings in the New York Times over like 75 years. His career was longer than that, and he died shortly before his 100th birthday, never really slowing down as he drew theater performances, album covers, portraits, and a lot more in this impossibly fluid calligraphy style. I don't know, getting the Sunday Times when I was a kid and like seeing his work at the top of the art section was just this ritual, I guess. This he was this institution to us. Anyway, David and I got to meet back in 2016 to talk about his career, his work with Hirschfeld, and the book he'd put out a year earlier, The Hirschfeld Century. And he's back now to catch me up on his life and Hirschfeldiana, but also to celebrate the publication of Hirschfeld's Sondheim, this new poster book from Abrams Comic Arts, just came out this week. Hirschfeld's Sondheim that's Hirschfeld apostrophe S, Sondheim. It's this amazing production. It's 11 by 14 inches, and it features 25 amazing prints of Hirschfeld drawings of Sondheim productions and portraits and other Sondheim-related art that Hirschfeld made. It's also got an intro by Bernadette Peters and a foreword from the theater critic Ben Brantley. The flip side of each poster, it has details about the production or event, along with this really entertaining commentary and anecdotes from David about Hirschfeld and his experiences with each production or each thing that led to the picture on the opposite side. And it's a gorgeous book. The production's phenomenal. The cardstock is really thick. I mean, this stuff will work as a print or a poster. And honestly, any chance to take in Hirschfeld drawings is a treat. But this one really ups the ante because, like David tells us, there is no one with a career like Sondheim in the theater and no one like Hirschfeld with a career chronicling it. So seeing them come together like this it's just a marvel. I mean, it makes all the sense in the world, and we'll talk about the genesis of the project in a minute. I'll say as far as the book goes, the posters can be removed easily and framed. They're really high quality, and that's why David says you should buy 2 copies, one for the bookshelf and one for the wall. So go get Hirschfeld's Sondheim, a poster book. It's out now from Abrams. I loved it. I loved just getting to revel in Hirschfeld's art and then getting to see, again, David's commentary around this stuff, what Hirschfeld's interactions with these Sondheim productions were like. And I love gabbing with David. So, hey. Oh, I'll note that because our last conversation on tape was 2016, besides our COVID check-in, there's been a bunch of other Hirschfeld-related projects that have come out since David and I talked, including The American Theater, as seen by Hirschfeld, 1962 to 2002, and the Hirschfeld Broadway Tarot Deck and Guidebook, which we will talk about. David loaded me up with those when I visited. They're also fantastic. Great production, wonderful selections of art. I visited him at the studio of Ben Soloway in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which you will learn about from the links that I will put into the show and episode notes for this one. Now, here's David's bio, part of it. David Leopold is an author and curator who has organized exhibitions for institutions around the country, including the Library of Congress, the Field Museum in Chicago, the James A. Michener Art Museum, and the New York Public Library. Internationally, he has organized shows for museums, including the Victoria and Albert Museum in London and the Film Museum in Berlin. He has been the archivist of Al Hirschfeld's work for 30 years, first for the artist himself, then for the nonprofit Al Hirschfeld Foundation, where he's now creative director. He has written extensively about 20th century performance caricature. I'll add that the Hirschfeld Foundation's goal, per its website, is promoting interest in the theater and dramatic arts by supporting not-for-profit museums, libraries, theaters, and similar cultural institutions. The foundation fulfills its mission by making grants to such organizations, by mounting exhibitions of Al Hirschfeld's artworks at museums and other venues, and by donating or lending Al Hirschfeld's artworks to such organizations. Anyway, I felt you should know that. And now, the 2025 Virtual Memories conversation with David Leopold. Tell me about Sondheim. How did the book happen, and how is it different than the other Hirschfeld books that you've done?
Well, the book was born actually the night that Sondheim died. When I heard the news, sad, not surprising, but sad. And we have a feature on the Al Hirschfeld Foundation website, alhirschfeldfoundation.org, called Spotlight, and where we just throw a spotlight on a particular performer or style, or, we use it to tell stories. And I thought, let me gather up all the Sondheim drawings, and we'll just, write a tribute. I'll write a tribute to Stephen Sondheim, who I knew was a big fan of Hirschfeld's work. And in fact, the last interview that he did 5 days before his death in the New York Times, for the New York Times, they photographed him in his home in Connecticut. He was sitting in front of a Hirschfeld of a review that he had put together called Putting It Together. And I thought, well, this is perfect. So I put this, I gather up all these drawings, and I was sort of shocked that there were over 50 of them. And it really captured all of Sondheim's career. And I thought this would make a great book. And then 2 weeks later, Ben Brantley, he was a longtime theater critic for the New York Times, had retired. He wrote an op-ed for the paper about Sondheim's death, where he said, you know, when he got the news, he pulled out his cast albums and wanted to relive the experience. And so he's listening to the music, and he pulls out photos, and he said none of the photos captured the magic of these shows. And then I pulled out the Hirschfeld drawings, and they totally caught it. You know, they brought it back more vivid than anything, you know, more vivid than my memory. You know, and he wrote this, I mean, it was a Valentine to Al Hirschfeld about Sondheim. And I thought to myself, well,
my work here is done.
The book's done. But we had this contract with another publisher to do 2 books that we ended up not doing. And it got delayed. And so when the time came up last spring, all of a sudden there's an opening. And I reached out to Charlie Kochman at Abrams Comic Arts. And he and I had been discussing a series of books. But of course, I had these other books, and I had to sort of do that first. And I came back to him and I said, oh, I really want to do a book now. I really want to have a book ready for the holidays in 2025. And he had said we should do a poster book. And I said, what is a poster book? I said, Hirschfeld's done lots of posters. That's easy. He's like, oh, no. And it's these full-page reproductions that can be easily removed and put on the wall. And I was a little skeptical, I'm going to be honest with you. Sure. And but Charlie is somebody who I implicitly trust. He's been a friend for years. I know him as an individual, and I also know him as an editor of great works. And I put my faith in him. And it was amply rewarded because he has a wonderful, they put a wonderful designer, Liam Flanagan, on the project. And all of a sudden, this beautiful book comes into being. And I don't think I ever really understood how good it was because, you know, I've done lots of books over the years. And I know how to look at a book in a PDF and on the screen and whatnot. But I had never done a deluxe oversized book. I mean, the book is 11 by 14 inches. And it was only when I got the first copy that I realized, oh, this is brilliant. Yeah. I mean, which sounds funny, like a book that I was involved in, but I didn't really know it. Yeah. I told our press people, I said, don't send PDFs on this one. Send them the book because anybody who gets the book is going to respond. And which has been the case, which has been terrific. And what made this book different than any other book is we've never focused a book. There's never been a Hirschfeld book focused on a single individual's accomplishments. We've done books on the American theater. We've done books on Hollywood, you know, things like that. But we
genres,
never, genres. Yeah. But we had never focused on an individual other than Al Hirschfeld. But we had 50 years worth of work here. We had some of the most important stage musicals of certainly the last half century, maybe even the last 100 years. And so it had a story all to itself. And as you know, I knew that Sondheim was a collector of lots of things, but he collected his Hirschfeld drawings because over the years I did a show at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences in 2001 called Hirschfeld's Hollywood. It completely explored his movie work. And I wanted to include a drawing of a film called The Last of Sheila that Sondheim and Anthony Perkins wrote. It's a murder mystery. And one of the reasons I wanted to show it is because it was an obscure title, but it was a great drawing of these wonderful performers. But it also had, in addition to the hidden Ninas in the drawing, he had hid the word Sheila in it. And I thought, oh, this is a great way to touch on that story. Yeah. And so we wrote to Sondheim, and he was great. He's like, of course, you can have it, you know, please. And then 3 weeks later, he writes to the Academy and says, I don't think I'm going to be able to lend that work. Why? Because the frame that it was in was built into the wall of his home. and he had no idea how he was going to get it out or what could be, because I had said to him, if you lend us something, we'll give you something to hang in its place, because that's something we can do. Excuse me. And he just, it was going to be physically sort of very difficult. And what was I going to say? Stephen Sondheim, take apart your house because I need this drawing. If it was Gone with the Wind or something, okay, that's important. We've got to have it.
The Last of Sheila.
The Last of Sheila. Nobody was going to be like, how could you do this show and not include that one? So he was very nice about it. And then in 2015, I did a big show at the New York Historical Society called The Hirschfeld Century. And I did a book. We spoke about the book
we met.
that I did for Knopf for that. And I wanted to use the drawing of Company. And it was right in the account books of Hirschfeld that he sold to Sondheim. So I reached out to Sondheim. He says, I gave that to Hal, meaning Hal Prince. And I knew Hal Prince. And so I called him up and I said, Hal, we're doing this show of Al's work. And of course, he loved Al and he loved Steve. And of course he could have it. He was a wonderful, enthusiastic person. It's great. A couple weeks after that, his assistant calls me and says, Mr. Prince wants you to know that that drawing of Company is not in New York. It's in his apartment in Paris. And I said, well, tell Mr. Prince there's no problems. We will not be borrowing that work, because I knew that the New York Historical Society was not going to pay the money to bring that drawing home.
Insurance and everything else.
It's hard enough to bring works from different parts of this country when you start bringing it from other countries. And again, it wasn't something that I had to have. I thought it was great to summon up this period, but we found another drawing. Yeah. And it just killed me because so close to him. So there were all these wonderful drawings too. I mean, that's really any Hirschfeld project we do, we can come up with lots of themes and ideas, but do the drawings hold up? I feel like we not only have to care about what it does for the audience, but what does it do for the artist? Having the responsibility of an artist's legacy is something I take seriously. So we pulled out the drawings and looked at them, and I mean, there was Company, Sweeney Todd. Hirschfeld did all these wonderful drawings. Almost all of his theater drawings appeared the Sunday before the show opened on Broadway. Mm-hmm. So he didn't know if it was going to be a hit, a flop. That wasn't his point. He was essentially a visual journalist for the New York Times who was interpreting the shows as he saw them, through that lens, trying to capture the character, not only what the performer was portraying, but the character of the show, the essence of the show. And how he did that is the magic, because there is no formula to that. But then in between 1976 and 1990, he did drawings for this theater column in the New York Times, which was on the inside page of their new weekend section. They had added a section in 1976 called Weekend, and they had this theater column. And, Hirschfeld was 73 years old when they approached him. A guy who had owned the top of the fold of first the drama, and then it was called the Arts and Leisure section, to be asked to do something on the inside page that was one column wide. The drawings were going to appear 3 inches wide and 6 inches tall. Another artist might have said, no, that is beneath me. Hirschfeld was like, bring it on. It was drawing, and it was a challenge to him. And these, what we call Friday drawings, I think are some of the most interesting works he ever produced, because he had to distill his line. It's
going to say the parameters. Once you're given this narrow set of rules, it becomes I'm going to fit that challenge. Right. I don't have this expansive canvas now. Yeah.
He used to always say to me, know your limitations. Mm-hmm. And this was a perfect example. This was like postage stamp size. It was really small. And yet the drawings he got better at what he did.
Did he have to learn like the reproduction side of it? Was it different than the newsprint sort of thing? And he sort of had to figure out
that wasn't a challenge for him, because early in his career, he tried to draw his work the same size as it would appear on the paper. And he came to the conclusion that that was the engraver's art. That wasn't his art.
Yeah.
And so he started working on board that was, approximately 20 by 30 inches. And he knew that technology could get it down. Now, he wasn't going to do some big horizontal drawing for a thin vertical space.
Yeah.
So he understood that part of the assignment. And instead, he just, he purged his drawings of any non-essential details. Mm-hmm. And they made stronger drawings. I mean, you thought, this guy cannot get any better. And he gets better. Around 1983, he says to an interviewer, he says, "Oh, I'm now down to a pencil, a pen, and a bottle of ink, and I hope to get rid of the pencil." He never did.
I'm sure we talked about it in 2016, but that was the same vibe I got with Bill Griffith the first time we recorded, where it was just, you've been doing this comic strip like 30 plus years. Don't you start loosening up? He's like, no, I get tighter all the time. I've distilled this thing down really, really well. I'm like, okay, I envision this stuff as, I'll start slacking or I'll start getting loose. And it's, you start finding the absolute essences of everything. And,
the geniuses, and I count Bill Griffith and Hirschfeld among that group, it's every day. It's every drawing. They know that the blank piece of paper, or in Hirschfeld's case, a board, cares absolutely nothing for what he did before. He was going to have to prove it that day. Yeah. And he was going to create in Hirschfeld's situation, he was going to create a graphic question that only he could solve. And it was going to, and just as importantly, it had to meet his criteria. I mean, Hirschfeld understood what the editors wanted and what the readers wanted, the viewers wanted, but he was creating a drawing. The recognition value wasn't as important to him. He knew that he had to have it. And that was the easy part for him. He was looking to create a drawing that he said could stand on its own 2 feet, that could withstand the topical news value. Because, we looked at all those drawings for what was opening on Broadway that week. And audiences today don't look at them for that reason. But they're still captivated by them because they're great drawings.
So seeing it in print, seeing the posters and prints in a final printed book, given that, you had some hesitation about, boy, geez, pull out posters. What's it going to look like? But
well, it was, I love it. Yeah. I think it turned out even better than I could have expected. And it's made me say to people, you need 2. You need to buy 2 books because
one to hang,
the first,
one to read.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And we had a proof of concept on the poster part of it, right as we finished the book and it was going to get sent to China to get printed. I get an email from the stage manager of Stephen Sondheim's old friends. They had done a tryout in Los Angeles and they were coming to New York. They were opening on Broadway at the end of March or beginning of April. I can't remember when. And he was asking, they were going to hang some Sondheim-related things backstage. Was there any Hirschfelds of Sondheim, of Sondheim shows that they could hang? And this is how small my mind is. So I start thinking, oh yeah, we have this reproduction and this, and I start going through all these things that we could do. And I work with these remarkable people. And one of them is our media director, Doug Coons. And I'm thinking of all these things out loud. And he said, David, why don't you send pages of the book? Which we didn't have, of course. And I looked at him and I said, Doug, you're brilliant.
We now solve this problem going forward.
Yeah. It was a real moment. And well, since we didn't have books, I found out the kind of paper it was going to be on. It couldn't be the exact same, but I could make a reasonable facsimile. And I didn't make a reasonable facsimile of the whole book, just there's 25 full page reproductions, 11 by 14 reproductions of Hirschfeld's work. They've never been reproduced larger. In the newspaper, they weren't this big. There have been big books of Hirschfeld's work, but this is literally the largest book ever. We had to do new photography because at this level, we wanted every line to be as crisp as it was in the original drawing. And we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. And so we bring these over. I brought them over to the theater and I told them they're all 11 by 14. So the stage manager had already, you can go to Amazon and get 10, 11 by 14 frames for nothing. you had to run the gauntlet. When you came backstage, you had to run the gauntlet of 12 Hirschfelds of different Sondheim shows. And then David Lober was the stage manager. And he won my undying gratitude because, so they get put up, and the next day we get an order for a book, a pre-order for a book from Lea Salong, one of the stars of the show. I'm like, wow, I wonder how she figured that out, how to order the book. You know, that's wonderful. We hadn't really done a lot of publicity at that point. Well, he then sent me a video showing me all the pieces, and he had a 13th frame that had a QR code to pre-order the book. And I was like, my God, I love this guy. And that's really what it was. When people heard about the book, you know, we're a nonprofit. We support theaters and performing arts organizations, you know, things like that. Selling books is not what we do, although we love doing them. We've done other books. We've had other pre-orders. They've done very well. This one was at exponentially larger than anything we have ever done before. Hundreds. I mean, I just was shocked. Abrams was shocked. And that's always a good thing. Yeah. And because people love it. I mean, people love Sondheim, people love Hirschfeld, and the combination of the two, I mean, they're men of the theater who have theaters named for them, which is not that common. You know, right. Oscar Hammerstein, Stephen Sondheim's mentor, arguably one of the more important voices in the American theater, doesn't have a theater name for him. You know, Arthur Miller doesn't have, Tennessee Williams doesn't have a theater name for them. But next to actually Hirschfeld and Sondheim, their careers were not that long. You know, Hirschfeld's career in the theater is 76 years. He's in the New York Times on average every other week for 75 years. And that represents less than half of his work. Sondheim's first show is in 1957, and Hirschfeld records his last new show on Broadway during Sondheim's lifetime was Passion in 1994. So again, we have something that's almost 40 years. And then, of course, the revivals of Sondheim's work have brought us, you know, another 30 years of Sondheim productions. And now, of course, we're getting the Sondheim shows that he hadn't finished or never really worked, or, you know, we finally got a successful production of Merrily We Roll Along 43 years after it flopped on Broadway at a time when none of the creative team that produced that original production was alive.
Wow.
But they knew they had something good. I tell the story in the book because in the book, you always want to have a celebrity forward. They, you know,
yeah, and you got a good one.
And so when Charlie asked me who we should get, I said, well, Bernadette Peters would be the best one. And he said, well, why don't we start with her? And I thought, okay, sure. Why not?
Because otherwise you go lower and they say yes, then you're screwed if you do actually get her. So, yeah.
Well, we asked her and she accepted right away and wrote something wonderful in like 2 weeks. I was sort of really gobsmacked about the whole thing. Like, oh my God. She, of course, had quite a close relationship with Sondheim. She had been in 6 of his shows. But also, she had been drawn by Hirschfeld 11 times over like 35, 40 years. I mean, she knew him as well as Sondheim. And of course, you know, Hirschfeld was a Broadway first nighter, as was Sondheim. And so they knew each other very well. David Staller of the Gingold Group, who do the George Bernard Shaw productions in New York, he told me of a night that he had dinner with Sondheim and Hirschfeld, and all they talked about was Shaw, and that each one of them could quote whole passages of Shaw, you know, at will. And so I thought, yeah, these guys were part of a world. Yeah. They were part of a social world, and Bernadette Peters was part of that world as well. And she might be our last, you know, great Broadway star that connects us to that world. And as anybody who saw her in Stephen Sondheim's old friends, she still sounds great. She still looks great. I mean, I
didn't want to say it in any sort of sexist way, but
no,
good
but
Lord, she looks phenomenal. I see her on Instagram and such every so often, and it's still Bernadette Peters.
I mean, all hail. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just so great, and a nice person on top of all of it. So it was really great, and so it was a real love fest. We had put in this Ben Brantley piece. You know, I was so thrilled because I wanted to include it. But what we do is on these full page reproductions, on the back of them, we have first the information on the image itself, what it is, what was the medium, when it was first published. We have information on the show itself, when it opened, how many performances, what Tony Awards it got, because it turns out all these shows pretty much got them.
Yeah.
And then when I first was thinking, what do I write about? Because to rehash what the show is, I figured anybody who's buying a Hirschfeld Sondheim book knows the
plot
shows.
synopsis from you. Yeah.
A West Side Story. And
a transposing of Romeo. We know. Yeah.
So I tried to really focus on the connections between Sondheim and Hirschfeld and what they were trying to do. And the best one was for Pacific Overtures, this 1976 musical that Sondheim wrote. In his book, Finishing the Hat, his annotated lyrics, he talks about going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and seeing this trifold Japanese screen, and was just really struck by it because there was so little on it. And yet it was so powerful. And Milton Babbitt had always taught him that less was more. And he understood that intellectually. But now he'd had this epiphany because he was experiencing it emotionally. Mm-hmm. And what you leave out is as important as what you put in. And he was committed then to that kind of leanness in his own writing, to put that kind of leanness in his own writing. And the crazy thing is, 50 years earlier, Hirschfeld had a very similar experience with Japanese woodcuts, and came to the same conclusion. And I thought, well, that tells you a great deal about both men. And it actually even deepens with Pacific Overtures, because Hirschfeld would always talk about, who are your influences? And he would say Hokusai or Utamaro. But in late 1975, he was invited to Japan for an exhibition of his work, and they just wanted to celebrate Hirschfeld, and it was a very lavish, wonderful trip. I tell a little bit of the story in the Hirschfeld Century, and he goes there, and of course, what theater do they take him to but Kabuki Theater? And Hirschfeld sketches it all because he doesn't go to the theater, and not sketch. And he comes back to America and does all these wonderful drawings of the things that he's seen and experienced. And he ends up doing a series of 12 color lithographs of Kabuki characters. He's working on this, and then he gets the assignment to draw Pacific Overtures, where he goes to an out-of-town tryout, and all the characters are dressed like Kabuki characters. And I'm thinking, what went on in Hirschfeld's mind, and what a combination. They're like both thinking about the same thing at the same time. And I just thought, that's a story. That's the story that has to be told, rather than, this show was this and that,
X number of performances.
Yes. Because I feel like if I give you the basic information, when it opened, when it closed, how many performances, Tony Awards, okay, we've got the show information, because it is remarkable that so many of these productions were award-winning. Now there are flops. Merrily We Roll Along did not win any Tonys. He did another show, Getting Away with Murder, in 1996. That might have been the last new show on Broadway. That was a murder mystery that he wrote with George Firth, and lasted 2 weeks. And on the back of that one, I talk about the musical comedy that Hirschfeld wrote that was such a tremendous flop. It closed out of town in Philadelphia in October 1946, despite the fact that it had really great music and a very funny book, but they weren't two things that went together. So I got to... So both of these men experienced defeat as well as victory. And I thought that's important to say. And then it's 50 years of Hirschfeld's work as much as it is 50 years of Sondheim's work. The development of the two and the things that I talked about on each one, pretty remarkable. Just really pretty great.
How much did your perspective on either of them change in the process of making this? And I know you made a whole bunch of books and you've got a whole lot of stories and anecdotes in your head, but Were there degrees that you just had I really never put it together about X, Y, or Z?
I don't know if my perspective on either artist changed. I mean, Hirschfeld, I spent years with him.
Yeah.
And I've spent many years without him, but thinking about his work professionally. I mean, this isn't like, oh, I love Cézanne's work and I've thought a lot about it and I've gone to lots of exhibitions. I've read lots of books about it, but I've never written about it professionally. I've never done an exhibition of Cézanne's work. Well, Hirschfeld, I've done those things times 10. And we do the podcast, the Hirschfeld Century podcast. I mean, we do lots of things. And so I think it just deepened my appreciation because it led me to listen to the shows again. And, shows that, Sweeney Todd, that's a show that I grew up with. I remember the
all
TV
those,
ads.
Same thing, the commercials we used to see on
and to sort of listen to it sort of, I wouldn't say dispassionately, but, sort of clinically, professionally.
Yeah, it's good.
Made me hear it a different way. And I don't know if any of that shows up in the writing because, again, what I'm talking about and what I write about is relatively brief. But it made me appreciate the shows even more, and it made me appreciate the drawings even more.
When you're that lived with, like the sense that this is somebody you've encompassed, throughout, again, most of your professional or a chunk of your professional career, you're seeing how they interacted with another, we'll say,
another a heavyweight.
Yeah. I go with somebody who defined their era and the form that they were in, which Sondheim does and Hirschfeld does,
right.
And it's just we don't really have those nowadays, but
no.
These guys both,
legends.
Yeah.
They were making history in their lifetimes. And were they aware of it? To some extent, I think they were. They weren't dummies. But they also, I think Sondheim was very much like Hirschfeld. Starting a new show, nobody really cares what your last show was.
Your track record doesn't matter. It's
yeah.
what comes. Well, it was something I talked about with an upcoming guest who I recorded with a few weeks ago. There's a moment.
Preview, folks.
Yeah. When I was reading Death in the Afternoon, I think, by Hemingway, where I think he makes some comment about a new one coming out from Faulkner or Virginia Woolf or something. And it's like, those books were just coming out.
Yeah.
You were just there and you were renowned, and these gigantic, heavyweights were also just, oh, look, here's Absalom for the first time,
Right.
Again, we have a lot of expectations of artists nowadays, but I don't think we have that sense of.
Well, I'll tell you, certainly in books, one of the, like so much of the arts, the criticism, art criticism has taken a huge hit in the last 5-10 years. The book review sections, which used to be so thick in every newspaper, no longer exist. And most of the newspapers they were in no longer exist. But even in the papers that still exist, the book review section now is this flimsy little thing. Yeah. Books are being published still at pretty much the same rate, but very few people are reading them. I mean, we're living in that age.
I know. And it's blame internet, private equity, et cetera. But it's one of those things where the lack of that critical aspect of that I don't want to say gatekeeper, but there's a good function of gatekeeping also.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how much I've learned over the years from reading reviews of books. The New York Review of Books, used to be, that was a huge part of my education because you could learn the whole history of a subject by reading a review in those pages. And that still exists and that still goes on, but it's a smaller and smaller world all the time.
Yeah, when I talk to writers from there, and it's I'm reading every novel by person X because I'm doing a thing for New York Review of Books. I'm like, that's 24 novels you're rereading for one column that you're going to write for. I'm glad that exists.
Yes.
I'm glad that the ecosystem exists to that you need to have that degree of knowledge just to be able to, even if you don't refer to them,
right?
Yeah, having it all in there. But yeah, that when you see like the AP is cutting all its book critics and the Times,
New York Times. Yeah. Good Lord.
And I guess LA did also. Oh, was it LA Times? Somebody else.
Newspapers are the kerosene lamps of the 21st century. You know, we all had them, and then nobody needed them.
Yeah. It's one of those. Oh, I just read it online. I have the old men that I run and walk with still have I read I get the facsimile on my iPad. So they don't actually do the web page. They're looking at like a PDF of the newspaper. I'm like, sure, it keeps a layout man in business. I'm glad it still exists.
Well, hopefully they still have that discovery of looking at articles they wouldn't have read, but end up reading them because we're so siloed now that, we get to choose we get a series of headlines and then we choose which one we read. And I think we learn less that way. We just kind of reinforce what we know rather than learn new things.
Yeah. That's serendipity, the whole silo thing, just, that's why I do what I do.
Thank you.
You and I never would have connected if it weren't for Drew Friedman saying,
yes,
you got to sit down with my pal. And
okay, Drew.
And then
I'm coming for you now.
You hooked me up with Ben Modell and a couple other people.
Oh, sure.
Harry Katz also, people who the work and the lives, you never get exposed to otherwise. And that's the point of getting out in the world, I guess. But, that's me and
Ben wrote his first book.
Did he know?
Oh, yeah, the Silent Film Universe. I just started it. It's great.
I'm going to hunt him down and do a follow-up.
Oh, you should. It's a great book because here's a man writing about silent films from, it's not a theoretical thing. He literally lives these things.
Yeah.
And he's showing that it's an incredible medium that even if it was made 100 years ago, it still has plenty of things to say to us and delight us. Ben is just in a class by himself.
Didn't Ask Me Anything episode a week or two ago, and someone asked, what's the episode people sleep on that you really wish they'd said? And I said, I'll tell you the same thing I say anytime that someone brings this up, the one with Ben Modell.
Yeah.
I say that beyond just how does a guy make a living as a silent movie accompanist? There is so much under the surface going on in that conversation. I'm like, just listen to it. Trust me, you're going to get something out of it about storytelling, technology, audiences, reputations, and how transitory everything is. It's all there. Everything's encapsulated in this one that doesn't happen unless you say, Gil, the guy you got to record with.
Well, Ben, my son, when 10 years old, he had a friend who saw Lon Chaney's Phantom of the Opera with live theater organ. It wasn't Ben, but he came home and told his parents that's what he wanted to do. And we had a big laugh, And when it came 6 months later, it was his birthday, and I got him a lesson with Ben. I called Ben up and I said, Ben, I want to, here's this kid who's really into it. Would you give him a lesson? And classic Ben, he thinks about it for a second. He says, no, I can't give him a lesson. I have to give him 3. That'll be so that they have. He knew what he wanted to teach.
The curriculum has to. Yeah.
I said, Ben, good, and the kid's name was Brett Miller, and so Brett takes these 3 courses on Skype, which only tells you how long ago it was, and he is now one of the great theater organists in the country. Brett Miller. Yeah. Sometimes when Ben can't do a show, he'll call Brett. Brett has gone on to have this incredible career. This fall, he'll play with the Boston Pops and the Houston Symphony. Around Halloween, they'll show Nosferatu or Phantom of the Opera or something, and he plays along with the orchestra. And it's incredible. And I realize I would have not known this world because as Brett was getting into it, we kept on, we stayed in contact. He lives just down the road. And when he was 16 years old, he was playing Metropolis in Trenton, New Jersey. Yeah. And he had found the score. He really wanted to do it. He was, 16 years old. And he was at the Trenton Patriots Theater. It's an 1,800-seat theater. It's beautiful. And these theater organ societies take care of organs, and they're allowed to use the place rent-free for a night. And so that's how he was doing it. And so I said, I'll help with promotion. And I reached out to a lot of film groups and schools and whatnot. And I thought, the Philadelphia Inquirer should do a story on this. So I wrote to a writer at the Philadelphia Inquirer, said, 16-year-old sees future in silent films. That was my subject line.
Here's done.
Yes. Of course they called.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there's a whole aspect of the communal that we have to remind ourselves of. That sense of being in a theater, being around someone else experiencing a work of art that, too much gets, either spent streaming or, sitting by yourself with some headphones on and yeah.
I went to see Sign of the Times, the Prince movie in IMAX.
I'm so bummed I didn't see it while it was. I think today is the last showing for that whole thing, but
it was incredible.
Yeah,
I had seen the movie when it came out. I got the VHS, but I hadn't seen it.
As we'll tell you, just even though it's illegal, I did share a digital copy of it with David.
Thank you.
Quietly. So I got a DVD from Brazil and ripped that at high quality, and I figured I will keep this with me everywhere. But yes,
I hadn't watched it because I was thinking maybe I'll see it in IMAX, and I'd sort of forgotten about it.
Yeah.
And then 2 friends of mine said, "Hey, you guys want to see this?" And I'm like,
"Heck yeah!"
Yeah. So last Wednesday, I went to the AMC Empire on 42nd Street with them, and it was phenomenal. Now the movie is so great, but the audience was so great. There were people singing along, which normally I would not encourage, but this was so perfect for this. Yeah. Clapping at the end of numbers. People who clap at films. I mean, really, people, what are you clapping?
Yeah. They can't hear you.
But after some numbers, they were so great. I found myself clapping because it was such a great number. Such a great performance.
The first 25 minutes of that thing, just without break, and it goes up through. And I know it's a square thing to like, and that I'm incredibly unhip, but one of my all-time favorite Prince songs is the version of "I Can Never Take the Place of Your Man" from that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I get it. Everybody else has much, much cooler favorite Prince songs, but
Forever in My Life in that movie is my go-to, because then he ends with it. And it's devastating. Yeah. It's just so incredible. And I went with a friend who I didn't realize, but was as serious a Prince fan, particularly of this period, as I am. Yeah. So we're starting to talk about things. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I had this tape." He's like, "Oh yeah, I have this tape."
Like, ooh, and okay. So
we're already exchanging tapes. I love it.
Still remember when Love Sexy came out on CD, and we discovered it's just one track. You can't just record one song off of it. You got to play the entire 45 minutes and 3 seconds, and because that's who we were back then when this stuff was coming out. But it has been 9 years since we recorded. We did a COVID check-in, but that's a side thing. Other Hirschfeld stuff. You have the American Theater, as seen by Hirschfeld. There's a Broadway tarot I saw.
Oh, yeah.
Also, what other...
Well, Hirschfeld was not... he lived completely in the present.
Yeah.
He hired me to think about his past. Mm-hmm. So he would be asked about something in his past. He would say things like, "Oh, you'll have to talk to my archivist. He's put everything in order, and now I can't find anything." But
it's a good Thomas Dolby reference. Also, another past guest.
Well, he was always, he liked finding out what was going on now. Yeah. When we were approached 2 or 3 years ago by a woman, Emily McGill, to do tarot cards with Hirschfelds on them, I laughed at her originally because I thought that was such a ridiculous idea. But Emily had a great pitch about it, and made me realize what kind of world this was and how big it was. It was a really huge world.
It's a market. That's definitely
it's a huge market.
Yeah.
And so we cast these cards. We would sit in the lobby of the Algonquin, where I live when I'm in New York. And, she would tell me about the 3 of Cups, and we would talk about it, and we would start thinking of a character from a show that was kind of like that. Yeah. And once we thought we found a character that was right for it, we would then go look for a drawing. Because it wasn't important who the drawing was. We were looking for the character, and Hirschfeld was so great at capturing the character that the performer was playing. And... oh my God, it's fantastic. The Hirschfeld Broadway Tarot, put out by Running Press, came out last year I am so shallow. We had a press launch. That's how you do these things. And so we have these parties at the Algonquin because I worked out a ridiculous deal with the Algonquin that they have to throw us parties. And so we had a launch there, and our press agent was like, "Okay, we're going to do a tarot reading, but what else can we do? Because some people won't come just for a tarot reading because they don't know." And I turned to Emily and I said, "Do you do seances?" And she said, "I can do a seance." I said, "Okay, well, they just brought back this round table that they said was the original round table. And I said, let's do a seance and bring back the round table. Well, we put that in the invitation. Oh my God. I think I found the thing that will work with the press, because usually these things, you send out the invitation, you have to follow up with them. You're lucky if you get, well, maybe if I don't have anything else doing, I'll come, that type of thing. Within an hour of sending this, press were calling, hey, I can come. Can I bring a friend? And so it was great. It was launched beautifully and got on all these gift lists. It was a great night. And so it turns out there's a huge market for Hirschfeld Broadway tarot. And then before that, we had done this show at the Museum of Broadway, this new experiential space. It's not a museum. As someone who works in museums, the Museum of Broadway is not a museum like you go to. It's not the Met or the Modern. But they do have some artifacts in there. And of course, you can't tell the story of Broadway visually without using Hirschfeld. So there's Hirschfelds throughout. And we were the first special exhibition in there, because the last room of the place is a special exhibition space. And I saw right away that, oh my God, Hirschfeld had done this book in 1961 called American Theater as Seen by Hirschfeld. It was the collection of the first 40 years of his career. It was his favorite book. He had selected all the pieces. He had laid it out. And it was a book he loved. 3 days before he died, he and I were talking about doing a sequel, because I said, well, we've got another 40 years, so we should do that. And I mean, this is the insane thing. I was talking to a guy who's 99 and a half. And I am talking about something that would come out maybe 18 months. And neither one of us thought that was weird. He was working.
Inexhaustible.
I had believed that mortality did not apply to Al Hirschfeld, because a friend had said to me, the only difference between Al at 29 and 99 is that at 99, his hair is white, but he's still doing the same things. Mm. And he was going out almost every night or having people in. He was engaged with life. And like I said, he lived completely in the present. He died 3 days later. The book got put on hold, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't come out. And now I said, oh my God, this is the time to bring this out. There wasn't enough time to go to a traditional publisher to have this done, because everything gets sent to outer Mongolia, and then you have to wait till the slow boat gets into Los Angeles, then it has to come across the country and all these things. And we were just coming out of the lockdown part of COVID, and there was a 3-month wait in the LA ports, and we printed this in America. And the book is beautiful. I had to convince our nonprofit to spend a lot of money on producing a more than 300-page book, printed in America, which it looks beautiful, but it is the most expensive way to do it. And it came out great. And fortunately, at least for me, because I wouldn't have a job if it didn't, we made our money back in 90 days. And the book is still sold at the Museum of Broadway. And through our website, we have an online shop, alhirschfeldfoundationshop.org. We're not into really cute names.
Yeah.
We do have.
Sorry, go on.
We do have another site called hirschfeldhomestyle.com.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, you can get pillows and shower curtains and blankets. We try to. What I see is we can satisfy as many people as possible. We're living in a great age. I have lots of complaints about 2025 and the times that we're living in. But to be able to produce merchandise, print on demand, so that we can give really everybody everything that they want is great. Yeah. And, because we're not in the inventory warehouse fulfillment business, that's a whole other business. But we want to give people what they want. Hirschfeld's work was small d democratic. It appeared in places that there was really no barrier to entry. Newspapers, movie posters, magazine covers, album covers. His artwork appeared on more than 250 album covers.
I did see you in late 2023 at what turned out to be one of the transformative days of my life because it inspired the Instax project. But something else even stranger happened at the end of that day, which I'll tell you about. But you were doing the Hirschfeld's music presentation at City Winery.
Yeah.
And
so
you had some great stories of
and that's the other thing that we've been doing. Our mission
Broadway
is to support theaters and support the dramatic arts and visual arts organizations. You know, and in 2022, I was really thinking, what could we do? And, you know, you write a check to a place and that's great. Everybody loves money. But money, you know, that's going to buy you advertising. It's not going to put people in the seats. You hope it does. But, you know, for the money that you spend, you might get a couple of people. And I just thought that's not an effective way. Someone else can do that. We have something that still has marquee value in the theater world. And so I convinced the producer of the Bucks County Playhouse, who I know, and I said, I want to try out an idea. This is called Hirschfeld's Broadway, where I would get up on stage and tell stories about, you sort of take you behind the lines of Hirschfeld's work. And we would have a big screen on stage and people aren't looking at me, they're looking at the artwork. And I tell these wonderful stories because Hirschfeld wasn't just a spectator. He was a participant. And he had wonderful stories. Hirschfeld could go to the corner and come back and have a wonderful story. He had that kind of magnetism, charisma. I don't know what it is, but eccentrics, you know, just glommed onto him. And he welcomed it. He loved that. And so we tried it out at the Bucks County Playhouse. And then afterwards we did a pop-up gallery. And we gave the whole box office to the theater and half of all the sales. We'd give them all the sales except that's the money we use to support the foundation. And I thought, well, I can't give you all of it, but I can give you half of it. Because as I told our board is, well, we use this to raise money to give to theaters. Why don't we just go direct?
Yeah,
you know, again, just trying to take as many of the middlemen out so that the money raised will go to the purpose it was meant for. Also, it's great to help out a theater, but if the theater has to do a ton of work, are you really helping them? Yeah. You know, and we had created something that the theater just had to turn on the lights and take the tickets. And they did. They sent out some emails. I think we got one piece of local press. The producer at the Bucks County Playhouse, Alex Frazier, told me afterwards that he didn't think anybody was going to come. He had invited all of his board members because he just wanted to fill up the audience. And it was a little bit of a tightrope walk for me. I'm not a performer. I've loved the theater. I have a degree in it, but I've never wanted to be an actor. Never had that kind of look at me type thing. And now here I was, the guy on stage. And so that was an interesting experience for me. But I'd been giving talks for years. And they were always, when I give a talk, I can't read a script. They were all improvisational. Yeah. And I work with another remarkable person, Catherine Eastman. And about 10 years ago, we started giving these talks for the Hirschfeld Century. And she learned to read my mind. So I would start telling a story and the right images would show up. And everyone thought it was very scripted because everything was
so choreographed and everything show right up on time.
But it was literally me just
scrambling madly on an iPad or a laptop.
Incredible. And now Doug does it as well. I mean, they're incredible people. And I realized, oh my God, people can read my mind. That's a terrible feeling. But it's all been used for good so far, so I have no complaints. In any event, the Playhouse sold out. We were 20 seats shy of a sellout. Alex told me after the show, he says, all my board members are coming up to me and saying, this is why we're members of the board of the Playhouse. For special nights like this, you should do more of these. And they made like $15,000, and they didn't spend anything. Yeah, I had asked for the first time I did it, I had one lighting cue at the end of the show where I talk about Hirschfeld's passing. I wanted the lights to come down in one spotlight. First night we did it, screwed up. He didn't do it. Yeah. And when I asked later, I said, "Why didn't you do the cue?" He's like, oh, I got too into the show. I was listening to the stories.
I was just going to say, I was just so wrapped by you.
Yeah. So when the second time it happened, I'm saying, we're getting rid of the lighting cue because it doesn't work. And again, we wanted it to be low impact for the theater. and high results, and we've been very successful at that. We go around the country. We were just in actually the Shaw Festival in Canada doing it. And it's proven to be a very powerful way to connect with audiences because it brings the theater community together. One of the things Alex pointed out to us was it was so great because nobody wanted to leave because they were all telling stories about going to the theater and their Hirschfeld memories. And just as importantly, once they were in the theater, they're like, oh, they're doing a Vita. We should get tickets for that. And it was, when people feel part of a community, they participate. And all of a sudden, they are feeling part of a community. And so it's been really terrific. And because theaters, like museums and a lot of other places, have not seen a return to pre-pandemic levels of attendance. I'm one of those people who look at these studies all the time. They just came out with one in Philadelphia. And 70% maybe if they're lucky. And how do we got to get that other 30% because that's very important for theaters to survive. But it also, I think, reveals sort of the problem with success in the theater is, we've been through more than a half century of the regional theater movement. I mean, before the 1960s, the idea of a regional theater was simply where the road company went to do their show that they were touring from Broadway. And the regional theater movement sprung up to do, quote, non-commercial theater, and to bring it to the masses, really, in communities. And it was very successful in that. But the problem with success is that everyone thought we should get bigger. So now all these theaters have huge spaces and they can't make decisions like they used to. They can't do an experimental work that nobody's going to want to come to because they have all these seats to fill, and all the sort of things that come with it. So you have something like the Long Wharf Theater in New Haven. They gave up their space. Now, arguably, they may not be reaching as many people as they were when they were the Long Wharf Theater with a 500-seat theater. But they can respond much more to what's going on. They can bring their theater to communities that aren't seeing it or don't see it and do special things that way. And I think we're going to see, it's going to be sort of the regional theater movement in reverse because I think a lot of these places got bigger than they could. It's when these artistic endeavors get run by businessmen, which are so important to the balance sheet of an organization. But when the business people are making the decisions, they don't understand that you're not doing this work to earn a profit. Yeah. You are trying to satisfy an artistic need.
Sustainability versus how do we make it bigger and better next season?
Right. Yeah. And so we can't solve all the problems. I mean, obviously, but we can try to help bring back that audience, give people a great night at the theater, remind them why they love theater, and support the theater as well. I mean,
do you see younger audience members generally, or does it tend to be people our age and older who had a Hirschfeld background and got
certainly we get a lot of that.
Yeah.
The people who grew up with Hirschfeld,
the main base, but
yes, that's also the audience that goes to theater.
Sure.
The younger audience coming to theaters, that's always been, how do you get that? And over time, you do it. What we're seeing just in general in Hirschfeld's work is it's fascinating right now to be working with Hirschfeld's work because I have a front row seat on the change in perception of an artist's work. You and I grew up with Hirschfeld, and hey, there was that drawing in the Times with the show that was opening up this week, or that new record came out and there was a Hirschfeld, or that magazine came. We saw it all the time, whether we wanted to or not. It was ubiquitous in a way that few artists' work has been ubiquitous like that. So we often respond to the people in the drawings. Oh, she was great in that. Oh, he was so funny. That type of thing. I love him, that type of thing. Younger audiences don't have that. Zero Mostel are two words they've never put together and don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And it's not important. It's hard for people like us who grew up, enmeshed in those performers' careers to see this, but the younger audience, I think, sees the work closer to how Al Hirschfeld saw the work.
Yeah.
He was creating a drawing that could stand on its own 2 feet. And that's exactly what they're seeing. They're looking at the drawing. We look at Toulouse-Lautrec's work for the drawing, for the colors, for the composition. We don't look and say, boy, he didn't really get Jane Avril, you know, or he really got her. Or I loved her in this, because there is literally no one alive who saw her perform. And I think there's maybe like 8 minutes of film of her. So we look at that work for its aesthetic quality, not its documentary quality. And everyone thinks that they understood Hirschfeld's work, but they were really looking at it for its documentary quality. What was opening and who was in it was a real big part of that experience. Young audiences are unencumbered by that, and they're responding to the quality of the drawing. And it turns out it's still a pretty big
really
audience for that. Only time will tell, of course. But yeah, they do come, because his work is instantly accessible. The New York City Board of Education in 2008 created an entire arts curriculum based on Hirschfeld's life and work, not to make students to be the next Hirschfeld, but to use, because his work was so accessible, you could get students to learn about things that they might be resistant to otherwise. And, you know, one of the first things is, you know, who is Nina? And we do that. And, you know, for so many of us to this day, you know, I spent years trying to de-emphasize the Nina aspect of his work. Jules Feiffer always said, worst thing Al ever did, you know. I disagree with Jules on a lot of things. I disagree with him on that, simply because so many people are like me. I was introduced to his work when my parents showed me how to find the Ninas in his drawings. And I looked at his drawings for years. I mean, I grew up in central Pennsylvania. Nothing ever happened. And then the Sunday Times would come and the arts and leisure section, and we would fight over it. Who was going to, I was one of 5 children, and we'd want to count the Ninas first. And it was years of doing this before I'm like, who are these people and what are they doing? And that opened a whole new world to me. And I hadn't put it together that it was Hirschfeld that had done that until many, many years later, after I'd been working with him for a while. I mean, it was just, I didn't set out to do what I'm doing, but I love every minute of it.
It's been, like I said, 9 years, and we've both become more mortal over 9 years. Have your views on archiving and preservation and, you know, what it means to be passing through time, has that changed as you've been?
I just turned 60.
Yeah.
Which is supposed to be a milestone of some sort. You know, all these milestone birthdays. Oh, I remember I was 40. Oh, you're getting old. And, you know, the same thing happens every 10 years. I have found the fountain of youth, people. It's work with older people, because I tell them I'm turning 60 and they're like, oh, 60. I wish I could be 60 again. And let me tell you, you always feel young then.
That's why I don't record with young people. It kills me. I always tell them, if you're younger than me, you're either 18 or 40, and I can't tell. Just, you know.
So, I mean, certainly my idea of time has changed. And I still believe in documenting the things that we love. Not just, I'm not one of these people who go into my garden and say, well, I had 6 roses this year or something. Yeah. Not that, but, you know, the work that means something. You know, I have this really weird specialty in cartoon and caricature. I never set out that way, but no, that's where I'm at.
Hey, man. Pharmaceutical lobbyist.
Right.
By accident.
Yeah.
But here we are.
It was dark and they were big, is how I always say it. You know, so with Hirschfeld, it's fascinating, because not only do you get a history of an artist's work, but you get a history of popular culture. For his career was 82 years, not his lifetime. His career was 82 years in which he was active the entire time, and at the end, he never had that inevitable decline. His work at the end was some of the greatest things he had ever done, which is so unusual. And so I think that knowing people of an advanced age who were still producing great work. Jules Pfeiffer.
Sure.
95 years old.
One of the pictures in this book of mine is Ed Sorel.
Right.
It's a pile of nibs.
Yeah.
I came over to his house to shoot whatever you want. I saw a huge stack of nibs lying there. My work is done.
Yeah.
This is your life.
Well, Ed is another one of those people that time isn't, I mean, it's important to them, of course. But the work that they're doing at any time, I mean, Ed's biggest success comes in his 80s,
Seymour Quast was another one. I sat down with Seymour and I could not get him to talk about the anything in the past. Mm-hmm. All he wanted to talk about is what he's working on now, right? And everything he's getting. I'm like, you're in your 80s and you have no interest in looking at the 60s and all the impact you had. You just care about the next thing you're doing. And okay, let's engage like that instead.
But that was Hirschfeld.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that's how you stay engaged. Mm-hmm. Hirschfeld saw all successive generations of his friends, break out, have their moment, and then have their decline. I mean, Tennessee Williams, who grew up actually just a few blocks away from Hirschfeld, not at the same time, but pretty in the same neighborhood. He starts in 44, 45, Glass Menagerie. And I mean, arguably, he produces a handful of plays that are still being done somewhere. I mean, someone's doing Streetcar Named Desire. Well, it's a Monday, maybe not tonight, but somewhere there's going to be a production of that or Glass Menagerie. A handful of his plays are still being done. Yet his active career on Broadway that really matters is 15 years. Yeah. It's nothing. In working on a project at Jerome Robbins, huge impact. But he was like a comet across Broadway, whereas Hirschfeld was like this eternal flame because year in, year out, he was part of what was going on. When he passes away in January 2003, there had been nobody on Broadway that was alive before Hirschfeld. All of Hirschfeld was, all of Broadway was had come up in the age of Hirschfeld. They hadn't experienced a Broadway without Hirschfeld. And, that struck me. Yeah. You can have that impact. And of course, and then the sands of time work really fast. And I've always noticed that. When my son was 8 years old, he was into the planets and he brought home a book on Mercury and he would read a book and then give me his book review, the best art criticism of all time. And Mercury, so he's telling me about it. He says, Dad, Mercury's so close to the sun that the days are really long and the years are really short. And here was this 8-year-old and it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I said, it's the same thing on Earth.
Yeah, trust me,
and that's what it is. Individually, our days, you've had your tough days, you work hard and, you move the ball a little bit down the field, maybe if you're lucky. And then all of a sudden, I'm 60 years old. When that happened, So that has changed. Preserving it has changed, although I can see that the world that Hirschfeld was a part of is really, really receding in the past at a much quicker rate than I had anticipated. Whether it's, we're going through this digital revolution very much like the Industrial Revolution, that the forms of things that we were part of our lives, relied on, have disappeared. We were talking about newspapers, but so many other things. Just, people date now almost exclusively online, whereas you and I, we had to go to bars and parties and things like that. And I'm not saying people don't do that now, but it's much less. So there's a social thing. There's we live in a different world, and I'm not saying I'm against change. I love change. But you realize that parts of the past that you really liked are disappearing. And I always ask myself, is it my age or is it the age? Yeah. Because I can't tell. I mean, that's the weird thing about being this age right now is I work with younger people and I'm constantly feeling as old as I've ever been working with them. But at the same time, they hit me to all kinds of things that I wouldn't know otherwise. And I feel that have become a big part of my life. So there's a lot of great things. Time is a artificial construct. I remember when Hirschfeld was it was 50 years since he had married his second wife, Dolly Haas. And I was over at the house and I said to Dolly, well, congratulations, 50 years. And she looked at me, she says, don't believe numbers. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? But I came to understand what she was talking about. When we're young and someone says, I did something for 10 years, you think, wow, that's a long time. Now, if someone says they did something for 10 years, I'm like, yeah, okay,
whatever.
Great. Nice. Call me when you're 25 or 30 or 40, because I have a different view of time.
There's the putting one episode in front of the other thing, or putting one magazine out after another.
Yeah.
That was, next year will turn into half my life spent around that pharmaceutical side of things. It was 1999, and I had that moment of, usually I've been saying, 20 years is 2019, Gil. It's now you're at 25 years, and eventually you start to hit the half your life thing. And that's
Right.
I always tell the story of the first time I had the 20 years ago moment, which was when I was working in Fort Lee. I was driving down Route 4 every day from where I live in New Jersey, and I passed the RKO 10-plex in Paramus, where Star Wars reissue was coming out in 1997, and I thought, boy, 20 years ago I was standing in front of that theater, and that was my first 20 years ago, and they just fast and furious. Now they just keep coming and coming. It's
well, but that's also a sign of a rich life.
Yeah, no, I take it as a positive that I went out and did things, and I'm still experiencing them, as opposed to locking myself in and not traveling to somewhere like Bucks County for a Labor Day afternoon. But yeah, I had wondered just from your. And you've answered really well, your perspective on what it means to archive, what it means to preserve, especially in an age where preservation is made easy. The act of preservation is made easier by digital technology, but the impact of it, the ability to distribute and spread these things out, you sort of have to.
Well, I live my life amongst objects.
Yeah.
And I feel like right now we're living in a post-object society. I have a 23-year-old son who, if I thought about it, I probably thought, I'm going to share these records with him, and I'm going to share these books with him.
Vinyl made a comeback. It's okay to give him records, apparently.
Well, yes, that was something sort of late in the game before he left for college. But he never, I couldn't make him a mixtape, but so much of how we spoke to each other, shared things with each other. And he, even surrounded by a world of art, which he has been, it doesn't mean the same thing to him as it did to me, and which is fine. But at the same point, he doesn't place any value in that. The picture on the wall could be any picture on the wall, and when there was the rage for NFTs, my board wanted us to get involved in NFTs, and I was like, I don't know. That seems like a scam to me.
Yeah.
And I said, we have to be really careful, though. I don't want to give away the rights to something. I said, the future may be Spotify for frames, where, Gil's coming over. He likes comic book art. Let me just bring up Jack Kirby, and I'll put that in all the frames of the rooms we'll be in. And I mean, that sounds crazy. It sounds kind of futuristic, but it's going to probably happen.
It does remind me of what Howard Chaykin said to me years ago, which was that Kevin Feige, the Marvel entertainment executive, was one of the great geniuses of entertainment because he took something that's literally worth nothing and made billions out of it. And I said, how do you mean? He said, what would you do if somebody handed you a stack of Marvel comics right now? I said, I'd look at a couple and then I'd try to give them away, just get rid of them. He's like, they're worth nothing. And he made billions out of that. Right. I'm like, I hadn't thought about it, but the object of the pamphlet, the comic itself, doesn't mean anything, or there are collector ones, etc. But we live in that world where these things are.
Well, and I have a friend who has a great comic book collection, and he's around the same age, and he said to me, this is going to fund my retirement. I said, well, you should sell them now then. I said, because if you wait another 10, 15 years, there might not be a market for this. The people who are most interested are your peers. And they're not collecting, they're not acquiring things, they're deaccessioning. And you have to, you sort of have to ride that in the right way. And he hasn't sold them. And I'm pretty sure that we'll be sending meals over there.
Just bring soup, please.
But I'll let you see my Thor #1.
So besides Hirschfeld, and besides the the other work we've talked about. We're in the Ben Soloway studio / museum. How do we?
Well, we call it the studio of Ben Soloway because that's what it is. He was a contemporary of both Hirschfeld and Picasso and Matisse. He showed in major national and international shows with the greatest artists of his time, in the 20th century. And in the 1930s, he did charcoal portraits from life of people on Broadway, opera, film, and dance for the Times and the Herald Tribune in New York. And that's actually how I met Hirschfeld. I was doing research on Ben Soloway's theater portraits, as he called them. I was looking through the clippings, and, he didn't cut each one out exactly perfect. And I could see, there's a Hirschfeld drawing next to it. Or I would turn it over, and, there's a Hirschfeld drawing on the back of it. And I was 23 years old. And I just had this eureka moment, like, I should call Al Hirschfeld and, I should contact Al Hirschfeld to see if he has any recollections of Ben Soloway. So I looked him up in the phone book, which already dates me terribly.
I've done the same thing with writers and artists I adored back in our 20s.
Right, exactly. And he was in it.
Yeah.
And there was Hirschfeld, Al, 122 East 95th Street. And I was too shy to call. And I was sure that if you called, you wouldn't actually speak to the man. You would have to go through functionaries, I mean, it was so what the mind does.
Out of his way. He's a cartoonist.
Yeah, great. Well, so I wrote him a letter. I had his address. I wrote him a letter. And he sent me back probably the warmest letter I'd probably ever received from anybody who was not a family member. And that's how I got started with Hirschfeld. He invited me to Fun City to quaff some tea. And I did, and we hit it off. And I was so proud of myself for hitting it off with Hirschfeld. I would later learn that he hit it off with everybody because he was that kind of guy. And then I was asked to organize the archive of his work. But that all came about through Ben Soloway.
Did you realize you were one of the weird eccentrics who glom onto it? Or totally. Did that take a while to figure out?
Well, that was one of our early things we saw in each other. Mm-hmm. The crazy things. He would say some things and I would tell him about some crazy person that I knew, friend. Yeah. Unfortunately, most of my friends would probably fall under the eccentric, my closest friends. And so we would just share stories of these crazy people that we knew. It seemed very, I remember his third wife, Louise, who was a great friend and I love. We had come back from watching a rough cut of the Lion King documentary, the Oscar-nominated documentary on Hirschfeld. And it told about all these crazy people in Hirschfeld's life. George McCoy, a guy who who lived off of going to press openings and eating the food there. And he slept in the caboose of the train at the World's Fair. But every Thursday night, he would come to Hirschfeld's house, have dinner, and usually sleep on his couch, And for Hirschfeld, that seemed perfectly normal. And, or he had, he was a supporter of Joe Gould. Joe Gould had 50 people who would give him $1 every week. Hirschfeld was one of them. And he would often have him for dinner, along with Lillian Gish or, Laurence Olivier. I mean, Hirschfeld's dinner table was quite a scene. So we bonded over that very early on. And I mean, he greatly admired Ben Soloway's work. But he referred to them as eye, ear, nose, and throat portraits because they were representational drawings. Yeah. And he was doing interpretive work. But so for the last, I think the first exhibition we did here at the studio of Ben Soloway was in 1992. And save for the pandemic, we've done at least one show a year and often two shows a year of Ben's work, his contemporaries, and occasionally a contemporary artist who works in a similar vein, or would get has a resonance with Ben's work, and that it's been a great experience because the studio is in the middle of nowhere and it sits in the middle of a 34-acre farm. Ben created this beautiful studio. I mean, wood and plaster. And, it looks like a 19th century French artist studio. And the painting is exquisite. It's representational painting. And if that doesn't float your boat, well, I guess you're out of luck. Yeah. But it works for me. And I like them both. I like both abstract and representational work. And I can go to see that exhibition and see that Renoir or that Cezanne, and I can come home and sort of pull up my own.
Luxuriate,
and it's great. When I started, I was told that the Philadelphia Inquirer, because we're in Bucks County, and the Philadelphia Inquirer's lead critic would never come here, and if he did, he would hate it. But I was young and dumb, and I thought, got to get the Philadelphia Inquirer out here, and so I invited him out, and he agreed to come, and he loved it. I mean, he loved it, and he wrote a wonderful half-page review that I couldn't have paid him to write something better, and he was a notoriously prickly person. And then he started coming out for every show, and that really helped us build an audience. And now, I mean, we like to call ourselves the best kept secret in Bucks County, but this is an unusual place in which there are no velvet ropes or glass partitions. When you see an exhibition here, you're not seeing it in a place that was like where he worked. It's where he worked. These aren't the kinds of things that he used. These are the things that he used. And it's not a mausoleum. I go to historic artist studios. That's my busman's holiday. Yeah. And almost all of them are mausoleums. Everything's been in the same place forever. And they're usually reproductions. And you don't get that experience here. We move things around all the time, just like Ben Soloway did. And so, I mean, we just had a show here this June of a collection of work that had never been documented. They had bought the pieces from Ben Soloway right as soon as they were finished over years. Mm-hmm. So we had no records of them. We did this show, and we sell work. That's how we support the studio. Sold half the pieces in the show. There were 40 pieces in the show. I was shocked. It never happens like that. And yet there it was. So, I mean, we're reaching an audience, and that's terrific. And so that's just one of the other things that I do.
Because you don't have enough going on, clearly.
No. Well, I've been involved. He was a great friend of Jules, Tony Off, the Pulitzer Prize winning editorial cartoonist. He worked for 41 years for the Philadelphia Inquirer, did children's books, eventually became a digital artist in residence at WHYY in Philadelphia. And the Library of Congress had contacted me. Could I appraise his collection of work, because he was going to be sold to UCLA. This is in 2010, and I wasn't really looking for that kind of work. But my friend at the library said, "You should really do it. You'll like this." And so I went, and Tony was this really great guy, and we bonded early over Bob Dylan. So I knew this was going to be fine. And I ended up doing a full retrospective of his work and a book. And it was great. And we were talking about doing all these other things. And then he passed away. And originally UCLA was going to get it, but we had put on this exhibition in the Philadelphia area because I said, this work is all going to leave Philadelphia. And these are the people that have seen it. You should show it to them at least one more time. When we did that show, when people heard it was going to UCLA, they're like, it can't leave this area. So then we had all these suitors line up, Temple and Penn and all these things. But they're institutions. They work on a glacial pace.
Sure.
And now it's not been announced yet. This may be the first place. The Tony Off Archive, which includes hundreds of drawings, if not thousands, reproductions of his work. I mean, sketchbooks, everything you would want. We even have a newspaper box that you used to see on the street. Because when I did the exhibition, I put all the handouts in newspaper boxes because I thought soon people will wonder what these things were.
One of those Instax pictures I have is a phone booth in the Upper West Side. I don't know why it's still there, but it's still there.
Yeah, so. Exactly. So the Annenberg Center for Media Research is actually acquiring the work, and their archivist there is great because she instantly saw that this wasn't just about Tony Off, but this was just about 40 years of history, and that they could use the cartoons in lots of different ways. And because a lot of institutions were like, do we have to take all the cartoons? And I'm like, yeah, that's the point here. That's the deal. Yeah. And at one point we were going to do it where everybody would get a little bit of everything, because, everyone thinks about the cubic feet in that type of way. So I like to say that I don't collect art. I collect artists. And I have got an excellent collection. Hirschfeld, obviously, Ben Soloway, Tony Off. I still work with the David Levine family. I worked with Jules a lot before he died, and turns out I'm still working with Jules. The family needs me to do certain things, and he'll have a centennial in a couple of years, and so there's always going to be things going on, and a lot of other ones. There's a local regional artist who's making quite a name for himself on the Upper West Side, Robert Beck. I did a show of his work.
Oh, you tried connecting us, but I just never had time to
incredible stuff.
Dive in, read his stuff, and do that.
He turned out not only to be a fabulous painter, but in working on a retrospective that I did in 2021, I knew he wrote a regular column for this magazine, and I so blithely said, "Oh, do you have?" I had read them from time to time and always enjoyed them, but I said, "Oh, do you have any copies of that column? You know, I'd like to read them," because I was looking for "I paint because" or "I am influenced by." He sends me over 150 of them. Thank God we had the pandemic, because that gave me time to read them, and I was shocked because as I read more of them, I realized this was good writing. Not good writing for a painter, but it was good writing. Yeah. And I sent him some friends. I sent some examples of the stories to some friends in publishing in New York, and I said, "Am I crazy? I think this is really good." And they came back and they're like, "Oh, this is really good." And we ended up doing a book of these columns because the columns were a painting, and he called it 1,000 words. And he would have a painting and a picture's worth 1,000 words. Yeah. He would write usually about 750 for the record. But sometimes it was how he got that painting or what it reminded of or some technique. And when he talks about technique, I'm sure you've read this book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Back in college, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Likewise. But that book gave you practical information on how to fix a motorcycle, which was not that's not what you got out of it.
Yeah.
And when he talks about painting techniques, it's fascinating. And if you're someone who paints, you can learn a great deal from these things. But for the rest of us, it's so much richer than the technique. But the technique is almost a metaphor for something else. And we put together this book. It was incredible. Because I said I can't put enough of these stories in the catalog to get people to understand. And fortunately, there was a community of people who loved his work enough that we could raise the money to do it. And now he's been writing now for the West Side Rag, which is it's not a blog. It's a real sort of newspaper of the Upper West Side, but it's online. And he writes a regular column for it. And it's the same type of thing. And they're great. And I had identified community as a huge part of his work. He had always sort of become or created a community in which both inspired his work and supported his work. And I thought that in New York he had met his match. It was too big yes, you could create a community, but not enough to support and inspire. And I was completely wrong. He has done that in spades. He's just incredible. And now he's thinking about doing a book of some of the West Side Rag pieces because it's a whole a story of the Upper West Side.
I'll have a second chance.
Yeah,
I felt bad letting you down last time.
No. Yeah, I thought it would be good for you.
Honestly, if I don't feel like I'm disappointing someone, it's not worth getting out of bed for that day, really.
Congratulations.
Yeah, if you saw just the amount of books I have with, oh God, to get back to this person, and geez, I guess it's been 3 years since that came out. I really can't follow up with them. Yeah, it's I think I've lost some contacts by doing that.
It happens.
But I know, you'll forgive me any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So what comes next?
Well, we just finished the next book in the Abrams series, which is going to be Hirschfeld's Icons. Mm-hmm. But before that'll come out in the spring. We are doing something a little insane for Hirschfeld Sondheim. So next week, on September 9th, is when the book is released.
Yeah. Which should be the day this episode comes out. So,
fantastic. Yeah. Abrams PR is patting themselves on the back, even though they had nothing to do with this. But Originally, we were just going to have a nice book launch party, cocktail party at the Algonquin, have some people sing songs. And then it grew. And now we are putting together a close to 100-piece exhibition of Hirschfeld's work in the Oak Room of the Algonquin. Mm-hmm. It's going to be up for 2 weeks, September 9th through 20th. It's free. It's going to be open every day, 12 to 7. And the work's available for sale because, again, we want to support more things. And the way we do that is through the artwork. We use the artwork for good. I've gathered together a collection of original drawings that are exquisite. Mm-hmm. We have a special section devoted to Sondheim, of course. And so the show is a collection of original ink on board drawings and hand signed limited edition prints. We have a handful. We did a series of prints with Broadway Cares. The Al Hirschfeld Foundation did it with Broadway Cares as a fundraiser where we approached performers. Hirschfeld, this was in 2020 and 2021. Hirschfeld obviously could not sign the pieces at that stage he died in 2003. But we thought if the performers signed them, we could then auction them off to benefit both nonprofits. And it's a good idea, and it turned out to be fabulously successful. But as we were in our first sort of meeting about who should we ask, because we had sort of
Team Bernadette Peters. Sorry, go on.
Well, Bernadette was an easy one,
yeah,
and she had done she does a lot of stuff with Broadway Cares. Mm-hmm. I said, well, the white whale is Sondheim. I know he's a fan, and this is again all before this book ever was imagined. I said, but I know he's a fan. I know he's collected some works, and there's an audience for that. So for most performers, and we got everybody: Julie Andrews, Liza Minnelli, Bernadette Peters, John Malkovich. I mean, we got everybody who. I suggested Penn and Teller, and they told me, "Oh, that work doesn't go for enough in auction." I was like, "Oh man, I feel bad for them." If you're listening, Penn and Teller, I was for you and ready to do that print at any time. But these were very small editions, 15. Yeah. That's 1-5. And what I said is, look, the performers are going to want these. So we've got to give a print to the performer. So the first print always went to the performer. And that left 14 prints that we split between the two groups, and we raised money from them. When we approached Sondheim, when I said we should get Sondheim, they said, yeah, he's a supporter, but he doesn't like to sign things. I said, well, no, you don't ask, you don't get. So ask. Well, he said he would do it, but he'd only sign 4. And he got to keep 1. So there were only 3. Yeah. So we did. 2 were sold for a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. And then he died. They got a lot of money before he died. The foundation has the last print signed, and we kept it in part because for exhibitions and whatnot. But now we feel like, okay, this is the time to sell it because we can do more. Yeah. It'll be given my brothers, we would have everything he ever did, and we would never sell anything. But that was the way Hirschfeld set up the foundation, and where I'm just fulfilling his desires, which is fine. And in a way, a drawing in a temperature controlled storage facility that no one ever sees, what's that doing to serve the work? Yeah. The work should be seen, and so I'm glad about that. So we have 2 portraits of Sondheim, one signed by Hirschfeld and one signed by Sondheim. We have the original of a TV Guide cover of Carol Burnett, a painting. It's really, really great. I mean, we have an image of an original drawing of Phantom of the Opera that's never been published and never been seen. I would like the Times to run it. There's a new immersive version of Phantom of the Opera that's going to open in New York called Masquerade at the end of September. And I would like the Times to run this drawing that is pretty much a masquerade, to have a Hirschfeld drawing of the show opening, the Sunday before the show opens. That's news all to itself. That would be great. So, because even the New York Times only cares about clicks. I learned that the hard way when we did that seance. Their great writer, James Barron, does a great column, New York Today. He did a piece on it and ran it at the top of the column, which, of course, we were delighted with. And our press person called him, knows him, and thanked him for putting it at the top of the column because we thought it would be at the end. And this was 9:30 in the morning, the day it was published. And they have the conversation at the end. Barron says to our press rep, Keith Sherman, he says, hey, listen, my editor has contacted me and that column is not getting enough clicks. Can you have the foundation encourage people to click on it? And I'm thinking, here's a New York Times columnist whose stuff is read every day. And at 9:30 in the morning, he has to be thinking about the clicks on his work. No, we're in a different world.
Nick Denton's world, back when Gawker used to have the clipboard up there, and you always had to type away and get. I got to get up on that leaderboard.
Yeah, right? No, it's so it's. I mean, it's not the world that we grew up in. Thank goodness, and it's not the world that we grew up in, and that's sad.
Yeah. Last question, which I hope you knew was coming. What have you been reading?
Well, I'm a guy who reads several books at a time. Mm-hmm. So I'm reading Ben Modell's Silent Film Universe. I am reading Robert Hunter, who was the lyricist for the Grateful Dead, wrote a memoir when he was 19 called The Silver Snarling Trumpet, about his sort of pre-Grateful Dead life. You know, when he met Jerry Garcia, maybe Hunter was 21 when he wrote this, but he and Jerry Garcia met around this time. They were living in their car, and the sort of seminal Grateful Dead scene, the sort of brain trust, is sort of forming in Palo Alto in the early 60s. And he wrote about this at the time and then just sort of put it away. And when he passed away, his wife looked at it and said, "This is a good book." And it's very revealing. Yeah. And so I'm reading that.
Reminds me a little of how, did you see the Devo documentary that just came out?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
The neat thing, it's just a thread along. I mean, you get them in the present talking, but there's no narrative to it all. It's them throughout. They filmed a lot of stuff from the very beginning. Yeah. Like there's so much footage from the moment they started. It's like, oh, this isn't we'll have a couple of stills and reproduce some scratchy music. Right. You actually got all this. So anyway,
it's kind of like that with the Grateful Dead or Bob Dylan. Yeah. There were people around. I mean, they were film and tape recordings was a relatively new medium, and they were used. And thank God, because we know more about what this world was like than anything that, our memories. Catherine, who I work with, always says, in 10 years, eyewitness accounts will not be admissible in courts because what we think we saw is rarely what we saw.
Yeah. So anyway, besides those two, what else you got?
So I'm also reading Steve Cohen, who's a great magician. Mm-hmm. Wrote a book probably about 20 years ago, but I'm finally getting around to reading it. I saw his show just 2 or 3 months ago. He is incredible. I've seen lots of magicians in my life. He was at another level altogether. He's been doing this show on Friday and Saturday nights. He did 17 years at the Waldorf, and then the Waldorf closed for renovations, and it just sort of seems to be emerging.
I have a conference that centers around the Waldorf normally, and it's been 8 years or so since we have to use all the other hotels. The Intercontinental Barclay has become the center of the place now.
He is the Hotel Lottie, which is the old Helmsley
that's
Palace.
Also one of the ones we use.
Which is really outrageous. Yeah. And he only has like 60 people a night. I don't know what it cost. I went as a guest of his. But let me tell you, whatever it cost, it's worth it. Mm-hmm. Because he didn't, it wasn't like he made it. There was a lot of magic, but it was a lot of like mind stuff. Yeah. He did an act called the Think a Drink, where, you wrote when you got there, you wrote your favorite drink on a 3x5 card. And, like halfway through the show, you give the card to someone else in the audience, and they're not allowed to show it to anybody. And then the cards are passed down to the end of the row, and then he gets them up in front of everybody, And he's not on stage. It's just, I mean, you're
Walking around,
essentially
isn't it?
seated around him.
Yeah.
And he pulls out a drink and he figures out whose drink it is. How he does it, I don't know.
We rewatched In and of Itself, that Derek DelGaudio special a couple of weeks ago. And that's the end piece of the whole thing, is all these cards that everybody has. And somehow he's identifying one after another in the entire audience. And it's like...
So that would have been magic enough.
Yeah.
But then he pulls out this copper tea kettle. And a guy's favorite drink is McClellan Scotch 18. He pours a drink, like a large shot glass out of it, and gives it to the guy and says, "Is that your favorite drink?" The guy drinks and he's like, "Well, I'm not a connoisseur. I know it's Scotch, and I'm pretty sure it's McClellan's, but I'm not sure it's 18. He's like, "You're right. It's 23. The next guy has a very specific pear margarita decision from the same copper kettle that he has not put down. He pours that one out. Then the next one, he's like, vitamin water. He says to this woman, vitamin water. What flavor vitamin water? Now he's holding the thing. She's telling him, she and her friends talk about it. They're like, dragonberry. And he pours out dragonberry vitamin water. How did he do that? How did he do that? And it wasn't a plant, because the last one was a espresso martini. And he said, "Who here likes espresso martinis?" And like 20 people raised their hands. And he gave it to my wife, and it was an espresso martini. There was somebody who had...
Actually,
I don't know how he did it. And I know that reading this book will not tell me how he did it. But he's a fascinating guy who seems completely normal. I mean, Hirschfeld would have loved this guy. And he did. He drew him. I mean, that's how I met Steve. He drew him 25 years ago. And he told me stories about that. But I knew that Hirschfeld, this would be exactly the kind of guy that Hirschfeld would love. So I'm reading his book because I just think it's fascinating. And he turns out to be a pretty decent writer. So, and then I read a lot of like Doggerel and,
the way we all scroll way too much.
I scroll way too much. But then, a friend has a poem someplace or a little chapbook that's come out, and, I want to read it all.
Yeah. That's how I fill that Sunday newsletter every time.
Yeah. No. The stuff I learned from there is terrific. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Along with all my flexing pictures.
I'm like, here's another thing I won't do.
But I will say, A, thanks for this. B, thanks for letting me take the Sondheim book and the American Theater with me.
Folks, if you want free books, come and interview me. I'll give you anything you want.
He's a complete whore with this stuff. But we also need to do this more than every 9 years. And
I hope
pandemics
so.
notwithstanding, we need to get together more often. So,
Well, let's not put a pandemic in the middle.
Yeah, I think
that definitely changed things a lot. And I just feel like the show here at the studio that we did this spring, that was the first time I felt like, oh, we're back. This is what it was before the pandemic. It's been 5 years. Yeah. That's a long time. And so I'm slowly seeing that more and more. Now, whether it's going to be able to continue under this political environment, I have no idea. But I'm not going to stop because,
that's why we're here.
They might have legalized marijuana, but I'm still breaking the law.
Thanks, David. And that was David Leopold. Go get Hirschfeld's Sondheim, the new poster book from Abrams Comic Arts. It's incredible. And as we talked about, you get this intersection of two absolute legends through this project. It's, you come to realize how much, what titans both of these guys were, what they meant to their art form, and the world that they brought into life. We'll put it that way. Now, you should go visit alhirschfeldfoundation.org, where you can learn a lot more about Hirschfeld's work, order Hirschfeld Sondheim and some of the other books and merch that we talked about, and listen to the Hirschfeld Century podcast that David co-hosts. The site is too long to spell. It's alhirschfeldfoundation.org, all one word. But I'll have links to all this stuff in the show and episode notes for this one. Oh, and if you're listening to this in close to real time, go check out the exhibition Strokes of Genius, Hirschfeld at the Algonquin. It's running until September 20th, 2025 at the Algonquin in New York City. Thanks for listening to the Virtual Memories Show. You can support this podcast by telling other people about it. There's no better way to build an audience than through word of mouth. Also, visit Apple's podcast page for us and leave a rating and review. Every little bit helps, you know? You can also support the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it and who you'd like to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or book or piece of music or comic or theater or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me a postcard, letter, email, DM if we're connected on Instagram or Blue Sky, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. Messages can be up to 3 minutes long. It'll cut you off after that, so call back and leave another message if you do. And let me know if it'd be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something interesting to share with our listeners, but I'd never run someone's message without their permission, so let me know. Now, if you've got money to spare, I appreciate it, but don't give it to me. I've got a day job that pays the bills. You should give to individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Crowdfunder, Indiegogo, all those crowdfunding platforms, where you'll find people who really need help just trying to make ends meet or get an artistic project going, covering medical bills or car payments or veterinary bills, and just a few dollars from you might make a real difference in their lives. Now, when it comes to institutions, I give to my local food bank and World Central Kitchen every month, but there are a lot of other things you can give to the Poor People's Campaign, Freedom Funds, Election Funds, Planned Parenthood, and Women's Choice. There's a lot of things you can do with your money to try to help build a better world, so I hope you'll give. Now, our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can visit my archives at vmspod.com to check out my 2018 conversation with Hal, where you can learn more about his art, his music, and more. And you can follow Hal on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. That's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download all our past episodes at Apple Podcasts and other podcast sources. You can find all my episodes and sign up for the Virtual Memories Show newsletter at vmspod.com. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram and YouTube as vmspod. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.